Pay close attention. The news you're about to see is fulfilling Bible prophecy.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news that relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yisrael Hawkins. Well, in the news today, we're going to talk about the RSV cases on the rise, hitting children especially hard. Hospitals are filling up there with those type of cases. Also, the turkey sales might not be as big as some are hoping with turkey prices as well as other food items continuing to rise.
Right.
We're also going to talk about North Korea firing some missiles there and invoking quite a response from South Korea and the United States. We'll have those details. And also China getting ready to strengthen their ties with Saudi Arabia, picking up really where the U.S. left off as far as the oil goes. They said, hey, we'll buy it if the U.S. doesn't want to. But first, sales were higher than forecast in the third quarter for AstraZeneca. Now, the Swedish drug maker says this is due in part to sales of its key cancer drugs. Now, sales of oncology medicine also rose almost 25%, and this led to the pharmaceutical company's revenue reaching nearly $11 billion. Now, this is combined with their core earnings, caused the company to beat all analysts' expectations. Now, currently, it expects its shares to increase in profit by a third.
Wow. There is one concern, though, the strength of the U.S. dollar. The value of the greenback is cutting the value of sales earned in other currencies. This, the company says, will cause its revenue to be affected between 4 to 6%.
Well, the United States will not be enjoying such high returns on its sales of turkey this holiday season, but that isn't the only part of the traditional meals that will cost more. Now, one Indiana farmer, Kyle Becker, explained to CBS Evening News how he will only earn half of what he earned last year, even though he raised the price of his turkeys this year. Now, the reason, Becker said simply, the feed is up, the labor is up, processing, even the boxes that we put the turkeys in have increased in price.
The average price for a whole turkey is now $2.45 a pound, and that's 70 cents higher than what it cost just a year ago. Why? Analysts are saying inflation is the main reason. That combined with the bird flu, which caused 7 million turkeys to be culled across the country. According to David Anderson, an ag economics professor at Texas A&M, turkey production is about 5% down this year.
While there still are some discounted turkeys to be found, this is just a lure to some of the holiday shoppers because they're going to pay for other essential groceries once they're inside the store. Now, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, butter prices have increased almost 27% since last year, and eggs over 30% higher. Now, and if someone would like to buy an already baked pumpkin pie or other baked items, it's going to cost them roughly 21% more than what it did in the year 2021.
You know, it's crazy to think about something as simple as eggs. I mean, just several years ago, you used to be able to buy a dozen of eggs for, about $1 for an entire dozen. Now they're costing upwards of $3 and $4 for a dozen.
Quite a price hike.
That's right. Restaurant owners are also having trouble acquiring enough turkey for their menus. One example is Rogel's Barbecue in Katy, Texas. The owner, Russell Rogel, ordered 200 cases of turkey breast back in September, but only received 50 and was told that is all he can get at this time.
Well, the number of children coming down with RSV is surging, and pediatric wards have been filled to their highest level in 2 years. Now, many emergencies have been life-threatening, and one story aired on ABC World News Tonight of a baby's dramatic rescue after the child had stopped breathing. Now, 2 police officers rushed into a Kansas City, Missouri home to rescue a 1-month-old baby who had stopped breathing.
Now, their body camera shows the video of them taking the motionless child in their hands and beginning to perform chest compressions on her. After only a few seconds, the little girl was breathing again and was rushed to the hospital where she was diagnosed with the respiratory illness RSV. The two officers were relieved to speak to the baby's parents and know their daughter, Kamaya, was doing all right. Premature babies like Kamaya are among the ones at greatest risk of getting this sickness.
Well, have you ever wondered what occurs to someone's ashes when they are cremated? Well, you might think they end up in an urn sitting in someone's living room. Now, there is a new option. Well, the BBC shared the story of a man who makes a living dropping people's ashes wherever they desire, with the help of a drone. Take a look at this video.
The actual spectacle of the release of the ashes itself, it does look spectacular, and so that's something that it's a good takeaway for the families. We've scattered ashes at university campus. We've scattered ashes on rivers, inland, which works particularly well for the Hindu community. Some of the families help transfer the ashes into the ash box that we use with the drone. And some of the families even like to familiarise themselves with the handset so that if they want to particularly operate the switch that manages the release, then they can do that too.
It's interesting how people are using technology to try to kind of incorporate how they take care of their loved ones in death. And this man, of course, is making a living as a result of that. Well, we're going to turn it over to our field correspondent, Larry McGee, as he has some information, some news for us in regards to President Xi as China is preparing for war. Going to talk a little bit about those missile tests that we discussed earlier from North Korea and the escalation that is taking place in that area. Larry, what do you have for us?
The world is becoming more hostile with each passing day as various nations strive to position themselves to maintain and defend what they have, or increase in power and possessions as the old world order crumbles and a new world order emerges. From an analyst standpoint, Beijing would fall into both categories, and they are readying themselves for war to achieve both objectives. Please have a look at this video.
Chinese President Xi Jinping has ordered his military to prepare for war. He cited increased instability and uncertainty to China's national security as a reason to get war ready. Xi Jinping inspected the Joint Operations Command Center of the Central Military Commission and urged troops to enhance training and combat preparedness. He said the People's Liberation Army needs to safeguard China's dignity and core interests. Xi's war cry is being seen as a threat to Taiwan, the self-governing island which Beijing claims as its own. Tensions have been escalating between China and Taiwan ever since US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited the island in August. This has been followed by a string of high-profile visits. But the latest flashpoint is British Trade Minister Greg Hand's visit to Taiwan. China strongly objected to the visit and urged Britain to stop sending wrong signals to Taiwan separatist forces. Recently, China had added a line to its constitution on resolutely opposing and deterring Taiwan's independence and implementing the policy of one country, two systems. China's 2 million strong military is the largest in the world, and Xi Jinping is holding the three powerful posts of the head of the Communist Party of China, the military and the presidency. He is the only leader besides the party founder Mao Zedong to continue in power after completing a 10-year tenure.
President Kim Jong-un has serious objections to American and South Korean joint military exercises, and to show as much, he has executed an unprecedented number of missile launches, with the highest being 12 in one day. The missiles were shot towards the nation of Japan, and there were fears there that a missile might fly over the nation as it had on a previous occasion, and this sent citizens of the country scrambling, but ultimately the missiles of concern fell into the China Sea. The U.S. has responded by publicly informing Pyongyang that if a North Korean missile were to hit the U.S. or any of its allies, then it would mean an unequivocal end for Kim Jong-un's governance. The North Korean leader was also threatened with sanctions and additional measures in response to a proposed nuclear missile test, but analysts believe that for all that, Mr. Un is unlikely to be deterred. The North Korean leader is reported to have fired 30 missiles in 48 hours so far, with the most intense phase of his upset recently playing out in aerial posturing with the South, where Pyongyang reportedly dispatched over 200 of its fighter jets towards the South Korean border. And South Korea responded by sending a response unit of its own, composed of 80 of its fighter jets. For YPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Well, Katan, we're going to continue to talk about North Korea's situation there. Now, the missile test from North Korea is just one front of its show of military strength. North Korea sent nearly 200 fighter jets to fly just north of South Korea's border and over the East and West Sea. Now, in response to that, the South scrambled nearly 80 of its fighter jets as a show of force. Now, the North kept its jets in the air for nearly 4 hours.
Wow. The North's moves were thought to counter the U.S.'s decision to extend joint military exercises, which involved thousands of military personnel and 240 planes, warplanes. Now this following Kim Jong-un's missile test with an expected nuclear missile test that, Kim's saying he's going to do here coming very soon. Now this, if he does go ahead with this, is one of the first nuclear missile tests in 5 years.
Now, the U.S. and the South are warning that if Kim Jong-un fires a nuclear weapon at the South or the U.S., that would be the end of his regime.
Well, take a look at this next video on strengthening relations between Saudi Arabia and China in the face of dwindling relations between Saudi Arabia and the U.S.
With the recent confirmation by Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman that the U.S. is now regarded as just another one of its partners in a new global order, it provides an opportunity for China and its allies to share the leadership position with Washington. Saudi Arabia last week reiterated its commitment to China as its most reliable partner and supplier of crude oil, along with broader assurances of its ongoing support in several other areas. It seems that the Saudi Crown Prince seemingly now sees the U.S. as a partner just for its security considerations, with no meaningful return on Saudi Arabia's part, whilst regarding China as its key partner economically and Russia as its key partner in energy matters, should not surprise the U.S. This latest round of talks and agreements comes very shortly after the signing of a multi-pronged Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, between the Saudi Arabian Oil Company, formerly the Saudi Arabian American Oil Company, Aramco, and the China Petroleum and Chemical Corporation, Sinopec, which can be regarded as a critical step in China's ongoing strategy to secure Saudi Arabia as a client state. As the president of Sinopec, Yu Baokai, himself put it, the signing of the MOU introduces a new chapter of our partnership in the kingdom. The two companies will join hands in renewing the vitality and scoring new progress of the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, and Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030. Crucially for China's long-term plans in Saudi Arabia, it also covers opportunities for the construction of a huge manufacturing hub in King Salman Energy Park that will involve the ongoing, on-the-ground presence on Saudi Arabian soil of significant numbers of Chinese personnel, not just those directly related to the oil, gas, petrochemicals, and other hydrocarbons activities, but also a small army of security personnel to ensure the safety of China's investments. Several other joint projects between China and Saudi Arabia that had been agreed in principle were delayed due to a combination of the ongoing effects of the pandemic, Aramco's crushing dividend repayment schedule, and concern from both countries, especially China, on how Washington might react to this clear threat to the U.S.'s own long-running interests in and geopolitical relationship with Saudi Arabia. Just prior to this, June saw Saudi Aramco's senior vice president downstream, Mohammed Al-Qahtani, announce the creation of a one-stop shop provided by his company in China's Shandong. The ongoing energy crisis, for example, is a direct result of fragile international transition plans which have arbitrarily ignored energy security and affordability for all, he said. The world needs clear-eyed thinking on such issues. That's why we highly admire China's 14th five-year plan for prioritizing energy security and stability, acknowledging its crucial role in economic development, he added. The mega project in Shandong, which is home to around 26% of China's refining capacity and is a key destination for Saudi Aramco's crude oil exports, will broadly involve the flagship Saudi oil and gas giant, creating stronger ties with the world's largest oil exporter that would enhance China's energy security, especially as we work on increasing our production capacity to 13 million barrels per day, according to Al-Qahtani. Aside from the fact that Saudi Arabia still cannot produce anywhere near 13 million barrels per day of crude oil, closer cooperation between Aramco and China will mean Saudi Arabia investing heavily in the build-out of a large, integrated downstream business across the country in tandem with its Chinese partners. Given the transition of Saudi Arabia away from the US and towards China, and the senior Saudis do look at the issue in these terms, whatever they say publicly, there is also every reason to expect Riyadh to continue to back China's efforts to undermine the power of the US dollar in the global energy markets as well. Not only is Saudi Arabia now a prime mover in advancing the China-GCC Free Trade Agreement (FTA), a key aim of which is to forge a deeper strategic cooperation in a region where U.S. dominance is showing signs of retreat, but also the kingdom is now a prime advocate for switching away from the hegemony of U.S. dollars in the pricing of global oil and gas. Just after China made a crucial face-saving offer to MBS to privately buy the entire 5% stake in Saudi Aramco that he originally wanted to float but could not entice Western investors to buy, the then Saudi Vice Minister of Economy and Planning, Mohammed Al-Tuwaidri, told a Saudi-China conference in Jeddah that, "We will be very willing to consider funding in renminbi and other Chinese products," he added. China is by far one of the top markets to diversify the funding, and we will also access other technical markets in terms of unique funding opportunities, private placements, panda bonds, and others. Moreover, recent reports state that long-running talks between Saudi Arabia and China for Saudi to price and receive payments for some of its oil sales in the Chinese renminbi rather than in US dollars have intensified in the past few months. Back in March last year, it was made clear enough at the annual China Development Forum hosted in Beijing, when Aramco Chief Executive Officer Amin Nasser said, "Ensuring the continuing security of China's energy needs remains our highest priority, not just for the next 5 years but for the next 50 and beyond." And yet, the US is surprised by the apparent finalization of the transition of Saudi Arabia away from Washington and towards China, which effectively marks the end of the 1945 core agreement between the US and Saudi Arabia that defined their relationship up until extremely recently.
Katan, if you remember recently, we talked about the U.S. asking Saudi Arabia to increase their oil production, hoping to lower the prices, but of course Saudi Arabia refused to do it, and now China stepping in there and saying, "Hey, we'll take we'll help you out. We'll take that excess."
That's right.
Well, Saudi Arabia has made a request to be a part of the newly formed BRICS group. Now, this bloc of 5 emerging economies have considered the request. The president of South Africa, one of the BRICS members, visited Saudi Arabia to meet with the Crown Prince.
Saudi Arabia wants to be the 6th member of that 5-member group. The South African president, Ramaphosa, said that Saudi Arabia is not the only country that wants to join the bloc. Several other countries have also expressed an interest to join, and under the chairship of South Africa next year, there will be a summit at which time Saudi Arabia and, of course, those other countries' requests will be considered. Yeah, well, we're seeing more moves by the international community as previous long ties are being broken, trust is being broken, and new relationships are being formed. But at the same time, while those new relationships are being formed, they're also affecting the financial or the money flow, like we see in the case of the United States. A lot depends on that petrodollar, and if Saudi Arabia withdraws from selling the U.S. so much oil and selling it to China, well, that's going to weaken the U.S. dollar and strengthen the Chinese dollar, their currency, and of course it's going to put the United States in a pretty bad spot.
Right, and as you mentioned, the United States being in a bad spot, their ties with Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, they're all dwindling pretty quick, you know, and as you mentioned, that's going to have an effect there because these other countries are getting together and they're just strengthening their ties, which is going to be it's going to be hard for the U.S. to kind of combat all of them together.
Yeah, and that's going to, like we said, weaken the U.S.'s buying power, which is going to put us in a position where we're going to see what a lot of these other countries are dealing with when they go to buy things and it's extremely expensive. So this is kind of the path that it looks like we're going, in addition to the escalation of war, those tensions being strengthened, and nuclear war being definitely something that's on the table.
Well, if you'd like to find out more about these stories, contact the House of Yahweh. When you do, don't forget to request your free copy of the monthly newsletter and the Prophetic Word magazine. Here's how.
To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites by going to Yahweh.com, YisraelHawkins.com, and Yahweh'sBranch.com. You can visit our website by going to YPNnews.com. You can email the House of Yahweh at info@yahweh.com. For all calls outside the United States, please dial the number on your screen. And don't forget the Yisrael Says and Ask Israel programs. You can find those online by going to YisraelSays.com and AskYisrael.com. Well, don't go anywhere because up next is another very informative sermon by Yisrael Hawkins. For all of us here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
Thank you for watching.